Multilateralism, Foreign Policy and Challenges. And we have with us a group of extremely innovative speakers to discuss this very interesting topic today. To chair this session, we are very happy to have with us Dr. Lawrence Prabhakar. Professor Lawrence Prabhakar is advisor, Center for Policy Research, Kochi, and has been a professor with the Department of Political Science, Madras Christian College, Chennai. He has also authored several books, a few of which are Growth of Naval Power in the Indian Ocean Region, Dynamics and Transformation, The Maritime Balance of Power in the Asia Pacific, Maritime Doctrines and Nuclear Weapons at Sea, and Maritime Security in the Indian Ocean Region, Critical Issues of Debate. Dr. Prabhakar is also associated with renowned institutions such as the Institute of National Security Studies, Sri Lanka, IIT Madras, Naval War College, Goa, and Institute of Transnational Studies, Bavaria. With us as discussant today, we have Dr. Avinash Godbole. Dr. Godbole is Assistant Professor at Jindal School of Liberal Arts and Humanities, O.P.Jindal Global University. He has authored several academic pieces on China's foreign policy, China's Asia strategy, and China's domestic policy. Our panelists today are Ms. Shruti Jargat, who will be presenting on behalf of Ms. Jayshree Borah. Ms. Jayshree could not make it today because of some unavoidable circumstances. Therefore, Ms. Shruti has kindly agreed to read out her abstract of her paper titled Going Beyond the United Nations, How China is Engaging in Building Peace in Myanmar. Our next speaker for this panel is Ms. Shubhda Gurung, who is ICS-HYI Fellow and a research scholar at JNU. She will be presenting her paper on tertiary-level education exchanges between India and China. Next, we have Mr. Rahul Suryavanshi and Yash Johri. They will be presenting their paper, which they have co-authored with Mr. Shivi Sanyam. The paper is on Brahmaputra, challenges to and opportunities of interbasin cooperation. Our last speaker for the panel is Dr. Saheli Bose, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, University of Calcutta. In order to ensure that the session is smoothly carried out, I'd like to point out two important guidelines. I'd like to request the panelists to kindly stick to the time slot that is given by the chair, and I'd like to request the audience to kindly use the raise hand option on Zoom, or to type in your comments and questions in the chat box, and to unmute only when the chair calls upon your name. With this, I'd like to invite Professor Lawrence to give his opening remarks as chair, and to please carry on the proceedings of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Chetri. I thank the Lord God for this opportunity to chair this session of the All India Conference of Chinese Studies, along with the Institute of Chinese Studies, along with the China Studies Center, IIT Madras, and to Dr. Joe Thomas for especially inviting me to chair this particular panel, which is a very interesting theme that has been laid out for us. China has been in the focus since 1978, and more so in the external realm, even as China began to assiduously build its comprehensive national power. And today we find that the Chinese power has been peaking in different stages. And as we find that the long march of China towards what we could call as a medium developed power, and also in terms of the various goalposts that China has kept into it, there are three interesting observations which I would like to make in this particular context. Given the fact that the study of Chinese foreign policy in terms of its outreach and multilateralism is quite a wide canvas into which we will be looking into it. We have four interesting papers. One basically looks into the context of China's foreign policy dynamics with regard to how China has been peace building in Myanmar, going beyond the United Nations. And secondly, we have looked into a soft power aspect as to how there is an issue of study of tertiary level education between India and China. And then thirdly, there is a transnational issue, which basically comes into terms of inter-basin cooperation of the Brahmaputra. What are the challenges and how does China and India contend that? And then, of course, the very important Belt and Road Initiative, and what are the costs and gains for India, and how does India come out of that, are the four important themes. And I welcome Dr. Avinash Godbole to comment on this extensively, either between the papers or as he likes. He could do that. He could do that after all the four paper presentations are made into that. So let me just highlight the three important aspects which I think are very pertinent towards China's outreach and multilateralism in foreign policy and challenges. Particularly in the COVID period, we find that the Chinese outreach and multilateralism has been sustained, notwithstanding the various challenges that has come from the global community in terms of how they had viewed the what we call the China virus. In spite of that, we find that Chinese outreach has been more in terms of smart power as well as soft power, in which China has sustained into that. Iconically, we find that China has used what we could call the Belt Road Initiative as an icon to further develop the network, and then China has been able to sustain this particular network, which has frayed or which has faced different challenges during this particular 12 to 14 months. But yet we find that China basically has been sustaining this particular momentum in terms of its global outreach, in terms of its regional outreach there. Secondly, we find that Chinese foreign policy has been also going through a lot of challenges, even as the perceptions of what China faces as adversity in global politics has increased over a period of time there. And therefore, how China manages this period of adversity, particularly in the context of the Wuhan virus and what has come out of it, is something that we have to basically fathom and also assess into that. I deliberately mentioned the word China virus and Wuhan virus because the locus standi of this entire spread has started from China, and that's where China has also encountered this adverse publicity that it has got into over these past months. There, notwithstanding, we find that China basically has been consistent in many of its policies, and it has not buckled under any kind of pressure that has come from the global community there. Although the adverse circumstances have been severe, yet China has been consistent in its policy postures, be it the United Nations, be it the European Union, be it the United States or India. We find that China has maintained a consistent posture in all these situations. In fact, in many cases, we find that China has also been prone to escalation of crises, and then it has been able to look into various strategies of managing the own brinkmanship situation it has created there. Thirdly, we find that China's diplomacy, global diplomacy, has accentuated during this particular period. Notwithstanding that, we find that China has been able to turn around much of the adverse impact that it had on its economy in the early month of the COVID virus. And today we find that the Chinese economy has a modest 2.3% to 2.5% growth that has been seen, even while major economies have been going in the negative side there. So therefore, we find that this is one thing that we have to look into, how China manages the domestic front, even as it portrays its foreign policy intentions there. Let me stop at this point, and may I invite the first speaker. I believe Ms. Jayshree Borah is basically not been able to present, and so I ask the person substituting her to do the brief presentation. And followed by that, we have Ms. Shubhda Gurung and Mr. Sanyam, and then Dr. Sally Bose. So let it go in that order. And then at the end of all the four speakers, we will have the discussion. We'll have the discussant to basically raise the issues, and then we will have a discussion towards the end of it. Given the time that has been there, I request the four participants to take not more than 15 to 18 minutes. Thank you, and let the first speaker go
on. So good afternoon, everyone. I am speaking on behalf of Ms. Jayshree Borah, who is a Ph.D. candidate at the Shanghai International Studies University. The topic of her paper is Going Beyond the United Nations, How China is Engaging in Building Peace in Myanmar. I'm reading her abstract. The aim of this paper is to examine China's engagement in Myanmar from the perspective of China as a peace-building actor in conflicted countries. The paper asks the question how much non-intervention policy plays a role in China's approach towards dealing with Myanmar, how China responds and behaves in United Nations regarding the question of crisis in Myanmar, how China is approaching its peace through development approach in Myanmar. Finally, it tries to understand how China is navigating towards building a Chinese approach towards dealing with Myanmar, a neighboring country with internal civil wars. The paper is divided into 5 subsections. A. China's non-intervention policy in Myanmar and 2007 veto in UNSC. B. China's response and engagement towards Myanmar peace process. C. China's attitude at the United Nations regarding Rohingya crisis and China's own response to it outside the UN. D. China's agencies for peace through development in Myanmar. E. A Chinese way, Asian solution for Asian problems. Thank you.
Okay. So we shall, that's been a very short paper. So we will discuss this at the end of the 4 presentations. May I invite the next speaker to please go ahead with the presentation.
Can you see my
Yes.
presentation?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair, fellow panelists, and other participants. The topic of my presentation is Building Bridges to a Better Future, Assessing the Role of Tertiary Education Exchanges between India and China. I can't seem to change the slide.
Maybe
okay.
you can.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. Thank you. At the outset of my presentation, I'd like to make an assumption that facilitating greater tertiary level education exchanges between Indian and Chinese students with the aim of fostering mutual understandings will create constituencies on both sides that will aspire for a friendly and good neighborly relations between India and China. This paper will now give a statistical overview of the current tertiary level education exchanges between India and China. As you can see from the table, the number of international students seeking tertiary education in China has increased threefold between 2004 and 2012, whereas those seeking tertiary education in India has increased 5-fold in the same time period. Interestingly, the number of Indian students studying in China has nearly doubled between 2010 to 2015. More recently, as of early 2020, before the pandemic spread worldwide, there were about 23,000 Indian students studying in China and merely 2,000 Chinese students studying in India, which means for every Chinese student studying in India, there are 11 Indian students studying in China. Needless to say, this clear imbalance makes it imperative to indicate the key factors that cause this imbalance. For my research, I have used the concept of push and pull factors from Ravenstein theory of migration, where he explores the factors that attract and repulse people from a particular region. Over here, I'll be using the same to analyze the educational exchanges between India and China. Due to the time limitation, I'll be simply highlighting the key factors in short, and will be happy to elaborate further if asked in the Q&A session. Firstly, discussing the key pull factors for India, the rich history and culture of India is an important pull factor. The affordability of tertiary education in various areas of study and India having the English language advantage have all been key factors that have worked in favor of India in attracting more Chinese students towards India for tertiary education. However, there are a number of push factors for India that do not work in India's favor. Lack of globally recognized institutions is one of the key factors. As per the influential QS World Top Universities ranking, no Indian university ranked in the global top 100. Only the Indian Institute of Technology Mumbai and Indian Institute of Technology Delhi ranked at 152 and 182 respectively. Another important push factor is India's struggle with internationalization of tertiary education. The National Education Policy 2020 states a clear goal of making India a global study destination, charting out an ambitious plan to invite top 100 institutions and universities around the world to come and operate in India by 2030. While the current government is taking steps to address this institutional deficit, policy implementation and results have yet to manifest. Other key push factors for India that do not work in India's favor are safety concerns, the lack of soft and hard power infrastructure for international students, and the reluctance in mutual cooperation in terms of degree. Conversely, when we discuss the pull factors for China, there are quite a few. Firstly, China has made greater efforts in internationalization of tertiary education. China's double first-class university plan and the Study in China plan with a greater enrollment of 500,000 international students at all levels of education by 2020 has already been accomplished, making China the third most popular destination for international students only after the US and the UK. Secondly, according to the QS World Universities Ranking 2020, two of China's universities have ranked at the top 25 universities in the world, Tsinghua at number 16 and Peking University at number 22. This also includes the number of scholarships offered by the Chinese government, their investment in education infrastructure, and the affordability of education has also made China an attractive place among young Indian students as well. However, there are a few push factors for China that do not make China an attractive place for tertiary education for Indian students. Firstly, the language barrier being one of them, particularly in the case of India, where 21,000 Indian students are pursuing medical studies, only 45 colleges out of the 200 colleges are listed by the Chinese government that are allowed to teach medicine in the English language. Furthermore, with nearly 500,000 international students studying in China during the outbreak of novel coronavirus in November 2019, this situation has put China in a precarious position and questions its credibility as an upcoming international education hub. The push and pull factors are further determined by few common challenges that both India and China face in fostering tertiary education, such as the security environment between India and China, and the trust deficit, the perception challenge, and also the students preferring Western institutions over Indian or Chinese institutions is also one of the common challenges. The question of internationalization of tertiary education, as both India and China are still developing countries and have larger issues to deal with, such as economic growth, poverty elevation. Tertiary education, however, takes a back seat in the list of priorities. Based on this assumption of the push and pull and common challenges discussed above, upon reflecting on the assumption made at the outset of my presentation, I've come to realize that the benefits of having student exchanges or educational exchanges far outweighs the opportunity cost which is lost by not strengthening this mechanism. While it's difficult to say with certainty that tertiary level education exchanges can alter the strategic dimension of India-China relations, but it can surely foster good neighboring relationship between India and China. Thus, this paper now offers few policy recommendations to foster the same. Firstly, the joint degree programs on joint academic projects are a welcome step. There is already precedent for dual or masters or joint degree programs between Chinese and Western universities, such as the PKU LSE double master's degree program. However, such joint degree programs have yet to manifest between India and China. Secondly, in the age of information technology, technology can in many ways transcend borders. E-learning platform is one such method of developing low-cost options for education and promoting mutual understanding. Such long-distance learning models have been optimally utilized by many Western countries such as England's Open University. Likewise, India and China can work on building such long-distance e-learning platforms across various fields of study that will be beneficial for students on both sides, especially in a pandemic hit world. Thirdly, there is a need of institutionalizing regular government dialogue on education between India and China. China has held various high-level people-to-people dialogue on higher education with the UK and other European countries. Such initiatives can also be replicated in the Sino-Indian context as well. Lastly, at the regional level, the concept of sister cities such as Delhi, Beijing, Kunming, Kolkata, etc., should not be just limited to cooperation in few areas, but can be expanded to to areas of common interest to both India and China, higher education being one of them. Furthermore, the Yunnan model can be set as an example, as Yunnan's many institutions and universities have collaborated with numerous Indian institutions at various levels. At the multilateral level, BRICS is one such multilateral platform that has built BRICS Ministers of Education meet in 2017, which outlined the importance of internationalization of higher education and student mobility by establishing networks among the BRICS countries. While these declarations and initiatives are a welcome first step, they can become a multilateral vehicle to foster better educational exchanges between India and China. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have the discussion of this paper at the end of it. But basically, let me highlight what the research scholar was able to look into it is in terms of the push and pull factors of the India-China possible convergences in tertiary level education, and also the common challenges that they've been facing in the international front. And the policy recommendations has been quite substantial about which we will deal about at the end of the session there. So may I invite the next speaker, Mr. Yash Johri and his co-authors to present the paper on in terms of draining the Brahmaputra challenges to and opportunities of inter-basin cooperation.
Sure, sir.
Rahul, you want to put the PPT?
Yeah, I'm on it.
Good afternoon. Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see our faces and the PowerPoint, and we're all good. Respected chair, honorable discussant, my co-panelists, I'm very happy and honored to be a part of this gathering. I've been fortunate to have been associated with ICS over the last 6 to 7 months, and it's a great institution. It's a watering hole for all China enthusiasts such as us, and it's a pity that we all can't meet in person, because these kind of conferences really serve as nodes of contact where you can where everyone's China journeys interject, and there's a lot of work that people can do together. So, but it's nice to meet virtually. I see there's 113 participants. It's very daunting already, even though there's not a packed room. But we'll do our best to introduce our paper, which we've titled "Reigning in the Brahmaputra: Challenges to and Opportunities of Interbasin Cooperation." Just one prefatory remark that I'd like to make is that please do read the paper, because the paper was a serious academic exercise from all of us. The presentation is just going to be an overview. We're not really going to be able to get into the flesh and bones of the concepts that we've actually picked up. Having said that, I want to sort of introduce, Rahul, next slide, please. I'd like to introduce why we came to this topic. Primarily, it was last year in about August or September. There was a lot of news doing the rounds about. Sorry, can you? I'll keep talking. There was a lot of news about the Indus Water Treaties and how well that had worked in August, because there was 60 years since 1960 when that had been signed, and it continues. India and Pakistan have had 3-4 wars, and that's one treaty that has stood the test of time. And agriculture in Pakistan has flourished because of that. Yet I come from a China background, having studied China at the undergrad level, and after having read law in Delhi University, I thought, how do I? There was one topic that came to my mind, was that there's no mechanism on the Brahmaputra that, if there's ever a conflict between India and China, and also Bangladesh, which is another riparian country, how will one deal with that? So the first, this idea sort of flourished by reading Brahmacheleni's book on water, as well as one chapter from Ambassador Phunchok Stobdan's book. It's called The Great Game in the Buddhist Himalayas. I think it's chapter 10 or 11. And that was actually the starting point of our interest in this. And once we understood, that all of the subcontinent and the Southeast Asia, the main cities, their rivers are all dependent on the rivers that flow from Tibet. And that the fact that we have zero agency, the Indians, Bangladeshis, people from the Mekong countries have zero agency as to how these waters are used. I just found it absolutely, that this is a problem that we have. And as a group, we thought that, we should present a paper and sort of try to start a conversation about how we can, do something about this, or like sort of make a, so anyway, to continue, as you know, that the Brahmaputra starts as the Yarlung Sangpo River in near Mansarovar in Tibet, or in China they call it Xizang, and it comes down south to Arunachal, where it enters as the Siang River, and then it flows through Arunachal, through Assam as the Brahmaputra, and then it goes into Bangladesh as the Jamuna, and then it flows into the Bay of Bengal. So, but just to give you an illustration of what the dam building exercise is in China, we'll show you pictorial representation. Next slide, please. Yeah, this slide. So the challenge that we face is that if you see the China has already completed the Zangmu dam, which you can see up there. They're in process of building this Motuo dam. The Motuo dam, if you read the paper, is supposed to be thrice the size of the Three Gorges Dam, and that is on the great bend of the Brahmaputra. So it has the maximum sort of incline where it can generate maximum hydropower. But yet at the same time, that also has massive implications on the entire ecology of the area. And given that, all the south subcontinent's entire sort of monsoon cycles, the rain cycles are all dependent upon the precipitation coming from the north to the south, these dam building projects will seriously affect all of our livelihoods. Forget the lack of us being able to dam our own Brahmaputra in the northeast, but this is much larger than that. So we thought that the scale of this problem is immense, and we must. So when we submitted our abstract, there was 3 things that we came to. Number 1 was, what is the feasibility of multilateral and bilateral agreements on this? Then we said that, across customary international law, the Stockholm Conference in 1972, the Rio Declaration in 1993, the concept of no harm, and sustainable development, that an activity in one country should not be able to cause harm in the second country. That we try to see the applicability of that in this context, and as well as we thought that we could build a legal strategy if ever there was a dispute, where could we take this for an arbitration. But we soon learned, we knew this, but like as we studied and read, we understood China's reticence once we study China's state behavior. And Rahul, who's soon going to take over this presentation, will explain to you the selective compliance that China uses when it comes to river disputes. We understood. If you could just skip a few slides, Rahul, to the 5, 6, 7. Yes, this. So this is the law that governs the UN Watercourses Convention that was ratified in 2014, which, funnily enough, hasn't been ratified by either China or India. That these 3 are the main sort of articles, or you could say like, the chapter 3 of the, like, if you draw an analogy to Indian constitution of the water law. And China didn't want to include Article 7 in this. This was the main reason why it didn't ratify. It wanted to subordinate the obligation not to cause harm, significant harm, because it holds on to this notion that we are sovereign, and even if it has an impact on the third country, so be it. So and before I hand over to Rahul, I'm just going to say that we know that any sort of Brahmaputra commission or any multilateral organization is going to have a zero impact. I mean, the chances of it coming about, let's be real, are not very likely. And this kind of a problem is only going to be solved by high-level politics. But we thought that, India should demonstrate its compliance with international norms. And, the whole conversation today's day and age is rule following countries and everything. So we should show India's compliance following particular norms, such as has been demonstrated by the Indus Water Treaty and the successful conclusion of the Kishan Ganga arbitration in 2010, 2012, and how disputes are peacefully solved by rule of law sort of organizations. And so we thought that it will be interesting to gain strategic leverage in this debate by showing our compliance with these international organizations. So we get, like, we bandwagon with other rule of law countries to put pressure on China to sort of come to the table. And, it may not be a commission, it may not be bilateral, it may not be multilateral, but at least put some form of pressure on them to at least come to the table and recognize that there are other players who are affected by their actions in Tibet in the context of water, leave everything else aside. So now I'd like to hand over to Rahul to talk about China's selective compliance in this regard when we study the state behavior. I'm going to mute myself now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yash. I hope I'm audible to everyone. I am unable to change. Yeah. So with the selective compliance, what I'm trying to portray in our paper is that China is very, very cautious of how it deals with the multilateral engagements of its or the bilateral engagements in its water treaties. So basically, one of the very important things for China is, excuse me, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the very possible outcomes that we see is that China has play on the geography. China has been playing with the game of where its rivers are positioned. So we can see that China has multilateral treaties with Mongolia, with Russia, with Kazakhstan. But at the same time, they don't have treaties for the rivers which originate in the Tibetan region. That is the Brahmaputra, the Mekong, the Salween. And one of the very important factors that it does that is because China likes to dominate. With Mongolia, the Amur is one of the very important rivers that irrigates the northeastern peninsula, northeastern region of China. With Kazakhstan, that's the same thing with the northwestern region and Russia to the north. So what China does is that China tries to hold back information or possess control by not sharing data or even damming the rivers when necessary without taking into consideration what the lower riparian states have to say. One of the very important factors that the Articles 5, 6, and 7 mention is the participation of the lower riparian state. The lower riparian states have no say when it comes to China. And that's evident from the policies that the Chinese have advocated. And giving importance to Article 7, the China has no intentions to regard by the obligation of no significant harm to the lower riparian state. The participation that we see for the Chinese, for the rivers that the Chinese entertain is very minimal, and the China will not be entertaining any sort of multilateral dialogue on it. China would not be part of any commissions, or China would not entertain any sort of legal bindings to the data sharing process or even the consideration of environmental assessment for the lower riparian state. From the point of view of India, what Yash mentioned to us is that India has been responsible upper riparian state. It has showed that over the last 6 decades, where it has upheld the Indus Water Treaty and even the Teesta Accords for the Bangladesh. With the customary procedures followed by India, which predate that of the Helsinki rules and the United Nations Water Convention, I think what India suggests is that India is ready to be compliant in a manner that is sustainable to the development of the water resource, which is the most important resource in the region. The international pressure on China can be made with India at helm, where China is made to answer for what it does in its own sovereign territory. Now, drawing parallels with that of the Mekong, which is multi-riparian river, which originates in the Tibet and flows to the South China Sea, we can see that the excessive damming on the Mekong has had detrimental effects on the lower riparian states. In the terms of the fish schools, fish migration, alluvial soil replenishment on the delta, and in the dry seasons, the delta where the salination of the seawater entering. On the Brahmaputra, though the Chinese have maintained that the run of the river will not be interrupted, we see that the Chinese can never be sure. With the Mutua Dam or right at the edge, the south-north water diversion project could be facilitated through that. And when the Chinese had demanded accountability for the very same matter, sovereignty issue is invoked by the Chinese, where they contest that they can do whatever they want with the water resource in their own region. The Mekong River Commission stands as a perfectly set model for the multilateral transboundary water agreement. It covers all the mentioned policies such as diligence, equity, settlement, joint mechanisms, and information sharing. The real-time data sharing dashboard of the Mekong River Commission is one of the highlights of the project. It's openly accessible, and it is mandatory for the people for the member nations to update it continuously. Like, though the Mekong starts from the Tibet, it is often seen that China does not want to have any share of vote against them. That is why China has entered the Mekong River Commission as a dialogue partner, but not a full partner. Bangladesh has high dependency on water from India. Bangladesh has 91% dependency on water. Compared that to the Indians, we have only 33% dependency on foreign water. So it is necessary for Bangladesh to be a stakeholder in this type of conversations, where a large amount of their population is going to be serviced by the Brahmaputra. The Brahmaputra River Commission is not in place, but it is a proposal that we want to bring to the people, where there are legally binding agreements and detailed procedures for the sustainable development of the basin. The natural endowment of the Brahmaputra in terms of its ability to provide agricultural irrigation, in its ability to provide fisheries and occupation, in terms of, and its potential to harness energy, the Brahmaputra has vast use, and it has to be used by all the three states combined. The legal framework curated for the water would cease Brahmaputra from being used as a bully mechanism. As Yash mentioned, that India and China have had altercations in the past, and as of Doklam and the Ladakh altercation in 2020, we see that China has had the power to withhold data for the Brahmaputra during this time. India should lead a caucus of international community where it brings together countries to understand that China is the only state which is not ready to be compliant in delivery of data or even resource management with its neighbors. As seen from historical experiences, China has had bilateral arrangements with its neighbors, such as Mongolia, Russia, Kazakhstan. It has also had a minor treaty with India for data sharing of the Brahmaputra, but its binding nature is very surprising, I would say. So what we're suggesting is that China does not want to be outplayed. China enjoys its veto power in the UN. China also has China flexes its muscles along with its neighbors in the South China Sea, along the Indian border. It's probably bought Pakistan by now. But what we're saying is that the Chinese don't want to enter agreement in which they will be outnumbered. Hence, a three-nation agreement between India, China, and Bangladesh seems unlikely, but there could be a provision where India enters an agreement with the Chinese and helps the Bangladesh be included as a dialogue partner for the same. For the concluding remarks, I would like to say that for the Sino-Indian water conundrum, India must forge alliances. India must take examples of the water alliances in the Danube River Peninsula, or even in between Uruguay and Argentina, between China, for example, with multiple countries. It must go to the Asian nations and talk to the Asian nations and bring together to form a dialogue for the Brahmaputra, which is a model which can be further replicated for the Mekong or the Salween. The model will be a champion to gateway bilateral and multilateral agreements, and time is of the essence in drafting these policies. Right now, China stands at the brink where most of the nations are skeptical of its scavenging tactics. The Belt and Road Initiative is on a hold for a large number of nations, and the RCEP agreement, which was extensively discussed in the panel today morning, we see that even the nations from the RCEP are not really for going with the free trade bloc with China. So we see that there is a lot of anti-China sentiment in the world, and India needs to capitalize on that sentiment and then make sure that we enter into a policy which is binding for the next 100 years at least, and that can be replicated further. And this will not only help a sustainable development for the region of Brahmaputra basin, but overall it will help improve dialogue between the two nations. Thank you.
This is an interesting paper where we have seen how rivers, which basically constitute what you could call as a regional commons or a global commons, and what would be the parameters of sharing among the nations there. And it's an interesting presentation where the three authors have basically looked into both the practical issues, the legal vantage point, and also it has been looked into China's behavior over a period of years. And we find that the conclusion of this paper has been that China has been always in preference of bilateral engagements rather than multilateral engagements. And because that is where we find that China basically is able to assert its hard power stance, and wherein it tries to edge its own position there. Secondly, we find that China has always been arbitrary in shifting the goalposts of what will determine a cooperative agreement. And never in the history of these 50 years, we find that China has come into any cooperative framework, but always have been assertive according to its own interests. And shifting goalposts of what China wants to do it's something that into which we find that no nation will be able to have any meaningful agreement or cooperation with China there. And thank you for this paper. We'll have more of this discussion when we come to the discussion point as well as the question and answer session. Next, we'll go to Dr. Sally Bose for a presentation on the BRI, and we will listen to it, and then we will go for the paper discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my paper here. I would wish everyone a good evening to all the participants out here. So for my presentation, I'm sharing my screen. Is my screen visible?
No,
Not yet.
Is my screen visible?
No.
not coming.
Sir, is it visible now?
No.
Okay. Something must have
Could someone from the tech team please assist Ms. Saheli Bose?
Could you just share the PPT with us, and we can try the screen sharing because I won't be able to direct you from here.
Okay. So
In the meantime, you can just maybe just start talking, and then we can figure that. But just share the PPT in the meantime.
yeah, I'm sharing the PPT. So basically, my paper is all about BCIM and BRI project. So basically, what I mean, basically done with this paper is talked about the BCIM from an economic corridor perspective. In this context, what I have done is, I'm very sorry that I am not able to give my PPT presentation because I have basically uh, got a background of my BCIM, that is from the fact that it was conceived as a sub-regional cooperation zone of between amongst the country of China, India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh, and the idea was put forward by Che Jihim, then the Deputy Director of Economic and Technological Research Center of Yuan Province People's Government in 1998. But basically the idea was that BCIM would act as a meeting point of three sub-regions of East, Southeast, and South Asia. 1999 was the year when BCIM Regional Forum was formed as a Kunming initiative, as a track to initiative it was formed. So basically what I intend over here is to understand BCIM from an economic corridor perspective. Now, economic corridors are basically those which, with enhanced, improved infrastructure and logistic, they get transformed into an economic corridor, which is basically an holistic approach that leads to the cooperation not only in transport, but trade, energy, communication of the concerned region. Here, the political boundaries in an economic corridor ceases and the economic development of the defined region take place. Now, I had a slide where I would be explaining my economic corridor with a cost effect and the regional and the national dimension. I am unable to put that in front of you. So
You
basically,
could try switching off your video and just using your audio, and then maybe try sharing your screen again.
sorry.
You could try switching off your video and sharing the screen again.
Since you appear to have some low bandwidth, you can just try screen sharing without your video. It'll leave more space for the PPT.
Okay. I think it's not happening.
Okay, let's maybe just continue.
Should I continue? It's not happening.
Yes, please continue.
Okay, so basically it is from an economic corridor perspective, and over here we have.
You can put your video back, Sally.
Is it on now?
Yes, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So basically the region connects around 2,800 kilometer long economic corridor, which is from Kolkata to Kunming, and the corridor has facilities to link the underdeveloped and landlocked regions of northeastern and the southwestern province of China Further connectivity is extended towards the Southeast Asian countries, where India's northeast have a considerable border with Southeast Asian countries, and the port connectivity through the Situe port and in Myanmar and Chittagong in Bangladesh. So what I have done over here is that in order to show that, that this is a corridor which is a profitable corridor or a venture worth taking, I have taken trade, I have taken tourism and energy aspect of BCIM corridor, and shown that there is an integrating effect of the corridor in terms of reducing the cost of transportation both within and across the region, of improving the international market access. Next, what my slides would have shown you was the existing trade in BCIM. So basically, through my slides, I have pinpoint some of the sectors where already the trade exists in the BCIM, between the BCIM countries. And by that mean, I wanted to show that there is the complementarity of goods that is existing into the region, where we have textile, clothing, and machinery, electrical equipments to a certain extent, and that of the agricultural produce by the other two countries, mostly by Myanmar and Bangladesh. So the complementarity of the goods which exist in the region is already there. Next, in terms of the energy trade, where the southwestern province of China, the northeastern region of India, with special respect to Yadana and Shivi gas fields of Myanmar, have huge reserves of natural gas. So that can be also given an impetus through this economic corridor. Next is that of the tourism is concerned. We have dotted tourist destinations. A circuit of religious tourism can be found, can be connected between the countries of India and Bangladesh, between China and Bangladesh, and India and China for that matter. Rich biological resources along with wide range of cultural diversity can attract tourists not only from the region but from across the region, across the world. Next, I have dealt with BCIM and BRI conundrum, or what is the future to be seen. As of now, from India's position is concerned, India, since the beginning of BRI, have expressed apprehension and stayed away. It is of the opinion that it can be of a geostrategic leverage and undue economic and diplomatic leverage for its South Asian neighbors, especially with respect to CPEC, or what you have, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. India have boycotted the Belt and Road Forum in 2017 and the second one in 2019. Most recently in SCO organization, it has not backed the Chinese-led BRI. India's reservation is likely to affect the working of the BCIM, given that the momentum is already slow. Now, in my last slide, what I would have done is, given the fact that BCIM could lead to more of a cooperative venture than that of the competition. So what are basically the broader implications of BCIM that matters? Now, BCIM predates BRI, and it can effectively showcase India's sincerity towards sub-regional initiatives. Secondly, it is India's only sub-regional economic corridor that can be emphasized on. Thirdly, greater possibility of border area development programs that can be taken up. And BCIM do not look so much threatening always. There is room for further negotiation. Most importantly, there is a need not to feel encircled, but to engage constructively with that of the Chinese authorities are concerned. With that, I would like to extend my apologies to all of you for not being able to share my slides. It would have been really great on my part if I would have been able to share it. With that, I would come to the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Sai Bose. Dr. Bose basically looked into the complementarities of the BCIM as a viable sub-regional cooperation framework in the absence of India's participation in the BRI. She mentioned about the items of textiles, tourism, and energy as an integrative effort by which this could have been a prospective corridor between the four countries in which China is a main denominator there. She also looked into the prevalent patterns of trade that exist in BCIM, and also how this could be improved upon in the context of India's twice boycotting the BRI in the recent years there. And she also looked into the prospect of religious tourism. That's one of the aspects by which BCIM could serve as a better framework that would come into it. But we know for the fact that India has neither preferred the BCIM nor the BRI, but has gone in for the sub-regional initiative of the BIMSTEC, to which India seems to have more attention being paid. So having said that, these four papers have been, four paper presenters have completed their presentation. And I now invite Dr. Avinash Godbole to basically come with the discussion comments, and after which we will open up the session for questions. And also I would like to bring to the attention of our paper presenters that several comments have been made in the chat box. I want you to look at them and also answer them according to what has been posted. First now to Dr. Avinash.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ICS and IIT Chennai for inviting me as a discussant in this conference. Let me apologize at the beginning if you hear more sounds in the background, because there's some construction going on in the neighborhood house and I have no control over that. I read through these four papers as much as I could, and so much as they part of the theme, or as they form the part of the theme. They are vastly different papers, and my job here, I would try to connect them and try to understand or try to comment on them through the commonality of the processes. Some of the details of some of the paper are rich, but let me go first paper by paper, a couple of lines on each paper, the way what I heard and what I read through, and then perhaps some of the common points. Jayshree's paper, which I read through, I think it can be turned into two separate papers, because this paper is taking on almost now 14 years of China's policy in Myanmar. And although I'm not a scholar of Myanmar studies, but from what we have seen of China's Asia strategy, its evolution and neighborhood first policy, plus China's experimenting with hotspots around the world. I think Myanmar was still not a primary location where China experimented with its intervention slash non-intervention. Sudan remains the primary case. China's and I believe that China's approach to Myanmar has changed over this period of time. So between 2007 and 2012, maybe the first phase, and 2012 onwards would be the and to the present era would be the second phase. So really, the paper of this nature can be focusing only on either of these different phases, because the foreign policy of China that we see now under Xi Jinping is actually a continuation of how the latter part, really the last 20% of Hu Jintao's era was what it was doing in terms of more assertive posture, in terms of more demand for its role, in terms of trying to preempt the rest of the powers in its neighborhood, and really trying to see to prioritize stability in the neighborhood as the primary objective. So that much. These are my comments on Jayshree's paper. It's also a very long paper put together along with the footnotes. It's about, I think, 12,000 words. So again, that's one of the reasons one can go, turn it into two papers. The second paper on India-China educational cooperation and tertiary education exchanges between India and China. When I read through the title, I was expecting much more, and that has to be taken as a compliment actually, because this is a start of a idea that can be developed into much in greater detail on why does China or how does China use its educational institutions differently compared to India, and uh, the role of tertiary education exchanges between India and China as bridges. If one has to study, one has to really look at perhaps the cases of students who have studied in those institutions, and the kind of postures that they are taking vis-a-vis each other when they have gone back. The backbone of American soft power, to me, it's its education system and the host of scholarships and the Fulbrights and everything else that it gives to the scholars around the world, and trying to insert the American way of thinking into young minds. I have no doubt that China is doing the same through its educational programs. It's doing much more, of course, through its educational programs. It's also training the next generation of engineers and doctors in the neighborhood. I mean, for example, in 2019, I visited the Three Gorges University, and I saw a large number of South Asian students who are studying dam building and engineering and hydroelectric engineering and those sort of degrees in masters and PhDs, and they are from across South Asia. And no wonder, rather no doubt that they will be the ones who will be playing a role when China goes and invests in these projects in these countries in the next 5 or 10 years. And like you also mentioned, these are the students on 100% fellowships plus stipends that are being given to them. So how do they expect to influence policy making through education in the future? That is the direction in which this paper uh, can go. I also like the uh, reading the details of the impediments in terms of the racism and the other social impediments that the Indian and Chinese students might face. uh, that is useful. Now, uh, the process of normalizing of the medical degrees, degree holders from China into India, how far and how well has that been going on uh, in the last few years? I think it keeps coming into the news and keeps getting out of news every now and then. So some details of that would also be useful, the recognition of degrees, etc. And uh, and do you think that India-China educational cooperation has actually taken a backseat the way China has uh, pushed the language institutions and the Confucian institutions across the world? And that is something that question also will add value perhaps to the elaborated and revised version of that of this paper. Uh, on the paper written by Yash and Rahul on water, an interesting paper, and I have been working with China-related think tanks and now teaching on China, like on international relations. So put together for last 12 years, or a little bit more, but perhaps you know, a paper of this nature, you'll have to include what next and how effective can uh, the Indian leadership be in taking together the Southeast Asian countries, for example, in addressing this concern. Uh, uh, Somebody in the chat has highlighted this question: how much water does actually come into India from China at the time at which Brahmaputra enters India? I mean, I don't know if the updated figures are available in public domain, or if the government is actually sharing these numbers, and will that number make a difference to our understanding of the India-China water issue? The bigger question actually that one highlights on this issue is the topography. I don't know why. Okay, sorry. Uh, so the bigger question is of the possibility of earthquakes and the series of smaller dams, even if China continues to claim that these are just aimed at hydropower and not at diversion of water. But what if there's an earthquake? I know every time somebody writes this paper, you have to highlight the possibility of uh, earthquakes and sedimentation affecting the sustainability of the dams at such an altitude, and sedimentation leading to earthquakes also, as has been the case in China in the couple of dam bursts that it experienced in the 1960s. That is important to highlight. But the paper is brilliant. The paper is quite diverse, and from the international agreements to the domestic cultural implications, it's a good paper. But again, on a paper on India-China water issue, what one is waiting to read is way forward. Way forward is something that has to come stronger. And if there's something that Indian government is perhaps doing wrong, and it's up to us to highlight to the Indian government that they should be looking at the issue something differently. I mean, the occasions to present papers of this nature are opportunities to present such perspectives also. So don't be shy of saying that. I felt on a couple of occasions while reading a paper that you just stop short of saying what government should do differently or could do differently, or maybe I read it from my cryptic perspective in that manner. But yeah, that opportunity should not be given. So the last paper, the BRI and the BCIM, is again a very good paper, but a lot has happened in this area. I think between 2015 and 2017, I think some of that data might be missing in the paper, because that was a time when many of the Chinese, not many, rather few of Chinese thinkers and commentators on the BRI projected BCIM as a decisively subset of the BRI project. And I think that was a time when the Indian government also decided to take a step back. So that reference, and once again, would the government or should the government have thought something differently on that point, been a useful point to highlight. My common suggestions to all the 4 papers now in 1 or 2 lines. Why does China get into construction mode? What are the bureaucracies of China which benefit from that? Who are the stakeholders who benefit from that? And I mean, of course, except for the education paper on education, this point is valid for the rest of the 3. Is something that can be explored by papers of this nature. China's necessity of construction benefits different political lobbies, different financial institutions, and also job creation through BRI and engaging abroad as well. So that is, and equally the dam lobby, which was quiet for close to 15 years, has come back strongly recently in the last 3 or 4 years. So that is important. Also, there are more white papers and more Chinese statements, official statements that can be used as references across the board. I mean, across these different papers. But once again, we are all learning at different stages, and let me compliment all of you again for writing very useful papers for this conference. And let me stop by thanking the organizers once again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Avinash, for the detailed comments. Now we shall open the 4 papers for discussion, and you could raise your hands and then make the questions. Meanwhile, let me request the paper presenters to also look into the chat box and see the various comments, and I want you to respond to these comments also. So I leave the floor open for discussion.
Can I start?
Yes.
Yeah, so I have like questions by 2 people. The first one is by Arjun Shah. So the question is, in order to attract greater number of Chinese students to India for studies, which field India should currently pay attention to. Like I mentioned in my paper, there are a lot of like factor. In that, I think like yoga and Ayurveda studies is something that is one of the factors that has attracted many students. In fact, in China, there's also the yoga college that has recently opened up in 2015, and it plans to open up even more like yoga colleges in Yunnan, especially. But in terms of attracting more, in terms of creating like in terms of like creating like specific fields to attract Chinese students, I feel like India should just focus on India should just focus on like building up their own capacities, and which would eventually like attract more students, more international students, including the Chinese students as well. And the second question that I got from is Dr. Bhim. He's asked me about how do you see India's new education policy and the school level, which does not affect like the tertiary level, because there are still a lot of like universities and private universities and government universities that do have Chinese language in their courses as a degree course and beyond. And the second question that he's asked me is, has the mistrust, the bilateral issues between the two neighbors sabotaged greater educational exchanges between the two? I mentioned in my presentation under the common challenges that yes, the trust and the mutual mistrust between India and China does impact the educational exchanges, but however, it does not like directly impact, because the statistical data, as in like the number of students going to China, has not really like it has not really impacted that, even though there has been like security issues between the two countries, like the Doklam issue and the Galwan issue. The numbers have been increasing, so I would not say it is like directly affecting the uh, like the bilateral relations, but somehow but I think it does impact it indirectly, and it does influence the I think the diplomatic relations between the two countries. So
May I take it forward, sir?
Yeah, you could go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I have questions from Indranil Bhole. What about the forming of a joint front with the Mekong countries in Southeast Asia? So with the Mekong countries, what's happened is the Mekong countries have developed a commission for themselves. Out of the 6 countries which share the water of the Mekong, which are China, Myanmar, Laos PDR, Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia, except for Myanmar and China, all the others have a commission in which they abide by the rules of the commission and the procedures for data sharing and exchange. With the commission was formed in 1995, and China and Myanmar joined as dialogue partners for the commission from 96. So I don't see a point where India would be advocating for a new commission which involves China, because China has maintained its stance that it does not want to be outnumbered when making a decision on the sovereign issue of its rivers and water resources. With regards to the volume that enters uh, by the Brahmaputra in India, I'm not sure on the figures, but one thing I do know is it's a substantial amount. What I can tell you is, with the new dam that is proposed at the very bend of the river, and the Chinese having a discussion on the south to north water diversion, I think Brahmaputra is one of the main rivers that they're looking to divert. and also irrigate the parts of Yunnan province, which is very close by and often suffers from droughts. So why it is important to gauge these factors is India and Bangladesh will be directly affected. And while India has a very short, compared to India, the northeastern population of India is very less compared to the mainland. But what happens is Bangladesh is the lowest riparian nation, which depends heavily on the Brahmaputra. India has already created a Farakka barrage on the Ganges, which diverts the water for the benefit of us. And India has somehow managed to hold a treaty with Bangladesh that the Brahmaputra will not be diverted and the Brahmaputra waters will be useful to the people of Bangladesh for irrigation in the northern parts. China has proposed a new dam on the Brahmaputra river in the 14th five-year plan, yes. The new dam in Tibet will new dam affect the India and Bangladesh? Yes, it will. What happens is in most of the population that lives along the banks of the Brahmaputra is heavily dependent on the river. It depends on fisheries, it depends on agriculture. And when the flow of the river is blocked, what happens is the sediment flow and with the rock and all erosion that happens, there's a lot of alluvial soil that is replenished after cultivation cycles. And when you dam a river, that is going to be blocked. And it will have a detrimental effect on that of the Indian farmers, the irrigation that we used for production of tea in the northeastern region, and even the effect would be seen at large around the delta, which is one of the largest deltas of rivers at the mouth of near the Bay of Bengal. IWT was mediated by the World Bank in 1960. In present times, is there any international organization capable of mediating India and China for Brahmaputra Treaty? In 1960, the situation was India and Pakistan were very weak countries. And the organizations such as World Bank were heavily funding these countries in order to help them grow and develop. So it was one of the ways that these countries had to advocate to the preachings of the World Bank. But now China stands as such a superpower in the region and even in the world, where in fact the Asian development because of the trade surplus it enjoys and the domination it has due to trade. And as China has constructed dam on the Brahmaputra, one after another, has Indian government drawn attention to the international community on this issue? If so, what are the international views on this? Well, the international community would like to refrain from bilateral engagements between the two giants of India and China. While the US has been of support for the lower Mekong countries, the lower Mekong initiative instituted by the United States has the lower Mekong countries in order to provide a protectionist view, but US has not taken that step for the Indian government. And Indian government, yes, while it is vigilant of what actions the Chinese take in the Tibetan region, I don't think the Indians possess that level of control to what the Chinese would do. While the Indians have taken steps in order to create competition among the dam building, where we have created new measures and proposals for dams in Arunachal Pradesh in order to assert our control in the so-called claimed southern Tibet, I don't think Indian government has much to offer. And the international intervention, if from the UN, would be significant, but otherwise there is no other organization that could do so. I have one more question, sir. Indian options to halt its construction as it's constructing in its own territory. It will be run of the river dam. Secondly, India and China doesn't have water treaty. There is a view that this issue is being weaponized by US for strategic interest and India is being used by it. What is your take? So yes, while China has mentioned the dams that they are going to be constructing are run of the river, we know the excellence of China in construction and the way they can modify these dams according to the use that they see fit. With the conversations they are having with the southern to northern water diversion and the rivers such as the Honghe and the Yangtze already being heavily dammed, I think Brahmaputra lies their option to, use effectively. China often cites the legal maxims of they are free to enjoy whatever they want to do with the natural endowments they have in their own region, and that is why there is no real obstruction that can any country that can bring to that of China. While weaponizing water, yes, China has weaponized water. Uh, when the Doklam standoff took place in 2017, China withheld information of data sharing from India from on the Brahmaputra. Often this has caused a lot of Brahmaputra has had a love and hate relationship where it provides a lot of water, provides a lot of energy, but also the flooding every year has provided a lot of damage in property. So I think water is a effective issue. US is not as far involved in Brahmaputra as it is in the Mekong, but I don't think that it will be involving itself because of its earlier trade wars and all within the Trump administration. And the US has a long way of their own battles with China in the South China Sea and etc. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question which talks about BCIM being very difficult terrain. This is a question put forward by Mr. Indranil Bole. Who will lay the corridor and maintain it? What about China-Myanmar corridor up to Myanmar port? So basically the thing is that in 2013, when there was a car rally which took place from Kolkata to Kunming, and it passed through some of the difficult terrains, passing over from Silchar to Sylhet and moving to the northeast, and then moving from Dali to reach Kunming. It was initially after that in 2013 when this car rally was completed, the idea of linking a land bridge, what we can call, of Kolkata to Kunming, it was then materialized. Of course, there are difficulties in the terrain, with all due respect to that, but given the fact that we had the joint study groups which were formed in order to undertake the surveys, that how the corridor can be led forward and what is going to be the best possible route to divert the corridor, was also under consideration. And the second part of is that Myanmar China corridor. Yes, of course, China has plans of an corridor with not only Myanmar, but for that matter of fact with Nepal also. Given the fact that these corridors are important and China is pushing heavily about these corridors into the region, so it is important for India, to lay its stake on. So to be a part into the discussions, because there is always a room for discussions. Given the fact that it is going to be encircled with this form of corridors, as we have seen, it is important to stick to it and to be a part, rather than totally outrightly rejecting the fact. Because if a corridor materialize, it is going to be a savior in terms of wear and tear of the vehicles, that amount of time that is taken, the amount of goods that are being traded between the countries. So for that matter, if is concerned, it's a corridor which is going to be, it's going to be advantageous for all the countries involved. No one should be rather taking the baggage upon of pulling the corridor, or it is going to be an assimilative kind of a venture.
Sir, you're not audible, Professor Lawrence.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Sally Bose, for the answers and questions in the chat box. Mr. Hemant Adlaka, please ask your question. Unmute your mic, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. First, let me compliment and congratulate all the four paper presenters. Excellent papers. And my question is specifically addressed to Yash Johri and Rahul Suryavanshi. Specifically, you all mentioned quite a few number of times about the US involvement in the Mekong River. So my question is related to that. Last month, China has officially launched a LMC hydrological data portal, which was attended by the representatives of the other 5 countries also. So I would like to know your comments on that, whether China has done it because of the mounting pressure by the US involvement on the one hand, and a small query that is, please correct me if I'm wrong. I read somewhere recently that Mekong River and its tributaries in total have 290 dams in operation, and there are 90 more dams being planned.
Yes.
You know, and LMC, as you know, L stands for Lansang. Lansang is the Chinese name.
Lansang.
So please, your comment on this data sharing platform. Thank you.
Hello, sir. So on the data sharing from the LMC, to develop the peninsula benefit. China has often found itself at crossroads when it's tries to, push out some kind of aggravated policy towards the Spratly Islands in South China Sea, and its cargo, which is often delivered through the passage of the South China Sea to itself, could see a potential blocking. So China wants to develop a homogeneous atmosphere in the peninsula of the Southeast Asian nations, and I don't think the US has a large part to play in it. The United States Lower Mekong Initiative was, I think, initiated in 2018, and there was one prior initiative, but it did not have as much impact as a dialogue between the nations itself. So that's one part. And the second part of your question, so could you please repeat? So you're inaudible, sir.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, second part is not a question, it's a query that just correct me if I'm wrong or confirm that Mekong River and its tributaries, there are 290 dams in operation.
Yes,
and 90 more dams are being planned. And according to some data or information that on Mekong River, especially the downstream countries, there are around 60 million people who depend on the water from there. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, sir. I think the piece that you have read is correct. There are multiple number of dams on the Mekong in the Chinese part, and even in the lower tributaries of Mekong, in the whole river system as a whole. And the plan of the whole new energy and renewable energy is being facilitated through the damming of the Mekong River. One thing that has happened due to these damming is it has tremendously affected the livelihoods of people in Vietnam, which is where the Mekong meets the South China Sea. Because during the dry spells, the seawater has tended to enter the delta and salinate the fertile soil. Also, the Mekong as a river has murky orange color. And due to the China damming, and even the northern states such as Cambodia and all damming, the water has turned crystal clear. And the fish schools and the fish migration, which used to take place earlier, has not been taking place. And that has also affected the fisheries. And the large scale damming, yes, while it's been in perspective by all nations together, that they are going to go ahead with this plan. And there is a very structured framework between all the nations to go ahead with the damming. It's correct what you've heard. There's a lot of dams on the whole river system as a whole.
Thank you. Just two more questions because we're running out of time before the next session starts. Two quick questions, please. Dr. Subha. Can you unmute?
Yeah, this is again the question to Rahul and Yash. Actually, the title of your paper says "Reigning in the Brahmaputra." So, may I, should I understand that you are trying to give a pivot to Brahmaputra, or trying to reign in or to control Brahmaputra in the China-India discourse? So, yeah, because as I was listening to your presentation, so you were also trying in to how India China should really look into, or trying to understand that that Brahmaputra has to given a pivot more importance to India China interactions. Yeah, a short question. Thank you.
So what reigning in the Brahmaputra actually signifies is that the control that both the countries are trying to exert on the river in order to portray its supremacy. While China does have the upper hand over us in terms of its ability of construction, the rapid level at which it can develop the river, what India is trying to do is limit that Chinese influence by the virtue of building dams in the Arunachal Pradesh region, which China claims as southern Tibet. The issue has been going on since the War of 62, and it has not been finished yet. So when India would have a functioning infrastructure in the land of Arunachal Pradesh, I think Indian government can better signify or better assert their dominion over the region in order to, cut that kind of interaction from the Chinese, that they will be claiming this territory like they're doing in the Aksai Chin province. Yes, sir.
Any more questions?
Sir, this is a quick reminder from the organizing team that we need to break for teas to set up.
So let me finally wind up with my concluding comments. Thank you all the 4 paper presenters for your diverse yet rich presentations. And what commonalities we could get out of this particular session is that the China basically has its own conception of national power, its own conception of national interest. And based upon the matrices of its comprehensive national power, China assertively uses hard power more than any kind of soft power or any kind of cooperative diplomacy to achieve its interests. That's the first takeaway there. The second takeaway is that China's conception of multilateralism is totally different, because China sees more advantage in terms of bilateral transactions than multilateral transactions. And therefore, even in the guise of multilateral transactions, China cuts more bilateral treaties or bilateral agreements in which it tries to have a favorable position elbowing others there. And thirdly, we find that China is always towards what is called as a hegemonic role in the region. And we find both in the Asia-Pacific as well as in the global role that China basically has been assertive in terms of achieving its interests, be it river water sharing or connectivity issues, or with regard to regional cooperation. China has always been very assertive. And therefore, we find that the Chinese outreach has always combined a civilizational culture, commerce connect, and by which they have been able to assert their power and then extend it throughout the region. And let me thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to chair the session. And may I invite you to congratulate the 4 paper presenters for the very, very erudite presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank the chair. We appreciate you chairing the session and for giving us your valuable remarks. I'd also like to thank the discussant for going through the papers and taking out time to give detailed comments on the papers. Finally, I'd like to thank the speakers and the audience. Just a quick announcement before we break for tea. The last session for today will begin at 5:30 p.m. sharp. It is a special panel on urbanization, and the meeting room shall remain open during this break. Thank you, everyone.